Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Larry Davis, and this is the Growth State of Mind. And today I'm having a conversation with Dr. Lauren Pitts. And we're going to talk about a couple of things: mental health, we're going to talk about sense of self, relationship wellness, and just overcoming adversity and trauma. So let me introduce you to my guest today. My guest, Dr. Lauren Pitts, is passionate and dedicated licensed marriage and family therapist, sports family therapist, and a life coach providing services to individuals, couples, and families, and groups including scholar athletes and professional athletes. And so I am excited to have Dr. Pitts on the show. Hey, Dr. Pitts, how are you doing?
Good to be here. I have been looking forward to this conversation.
So let's just jump right in. We're talking about mental health, and as you know, that's like I know growing up, I didn't hear a lot about mental health at all. Growing up,
Mhm,
I'm originally from Mississippi, and
mhm.
growing up in Mississippi, we didn't hear anything about mental health. And the only thing that we heard was, oh, so and so is crazy, or
Oh,
if someone's got,
right,
so and so is crazy, or we knew about the crazy house. They got put in the crazy house, the mental
right, right,
institution. We call it the crazy house.
right,
And other
right.
than that, that's all you knew, and so
Yeah.
it really wasn't a lot of talk about mental health, didn't know what it was. If you mentioned anything about mental health, it was automatically, oh, that person's really crazy, or they're kook, whatever,
Yeah.
and so, but I understand it can't be all of that. So
Mm.
let's just talk about, why do so many people shy away from the topic of mental health?
Well, it's tied to the stigma piece, right? So when you think about what you just said, there are these negative labels that are associated with people who behave differently because of their mental health issues, right? So there's stereotypes, Larry, that are associated with mental illness. Well, who wants to be known as crazy? Who wants to be known as the person that went to the crazy house? Who wants to be remember when we were kids, people used to go like this? They used to do that twirling of the finger thing to indicate, or they would say, cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. So for many, many, many people, it's easier for them to pretend as if nothing is wrong, because to acknowledge that you're struggling with your mental health for some people is the same as saying I'm weak. It's the same as saying, you know I, I, I'm going to walk around with a bullseye on my head now. I think about, I was 18. I'm 55. I tell people I'm loud and proud when it comes to me. Be like, oh my gosh, don't dance lip. No, no, I just 55 years of wisdom. But I was 18, Larry, when I said to my mom, I think I need to talk to somebody. And she said to me, you're determined to be the first woman in this family that's crazy. And I said, no, I'm determined to be the first woman in this family that's not crazy. And I meant that. And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or anything, but there's some history there, both in the men and the women in my family. And I knew, from 18 and down, just in the trauma that I had experienced up to 18 years of age, I knew that I was having a difficult time managing all that trauma and understanding how these things were impacting my overall well-being, particularly my mental health. I was suicidal when I was younger. I was suicidal for a long time. And I'm like, something about this is not normal. This is not normal. And people in my family weren't talking about it. It was just like everything else in too many Black households. It was swept under the rug. We're not going to talk about it. If we don't talk about it, Larry, maybe it'll go away. No. So people shy away from having these much needed conversations because they don't want to be the bullseye of the practical joke, because they don't want to be judged and criticized and ostracized and mistreated because of the state of their mind.
Yeah. I also think this. I think you're right. People definitely shy away from it, but I also think that some people are unaware, because I people and
Mhm.
myself was included in this. I mean, I'm much more educated now, but it was a time where certain
Mhm.
things happened, and I looked at it as normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk to people. There's people that I
Mm-hmm.
talk to. I got friends and things like that that I talk to, and they describe certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And when they describe it, I'm saying, you know, that's
Mm-hmm.
trauma, right? And they like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Right.
Because
Mm-hmm.
you know, depending on how you know you grew up and what neighborhood you grew up in, and definitely us, a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
as African Americans, definitely,
Mm-hmm.
we have these
Yeah.
experiences, and we we have normalized those experiences. Like, oh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
dysfunction in a family is normal. And so I think that sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
because it's not necessarily because people are shying away from it, although people are. Sometimes it's people are
Mm-hmm.
unaware that something is trauma. Like what
Mm-hmm.
you know?
No, you're spot on. And it reminds me of something that one of my professors said when I was in grad school. He pretty much forbid us from using the word dysfunctional because he said it's only dysfunctional to you because you're on the outside looking in. But you said that word normal. He said it's not dysfunctional to them. That is their normal. And when you look at a lot of, definitely us as African Americans, but people, period, Larry, whatever your normal is, that is your normal. And whether it's screaming, yelling, hooping, hollering, cussing, fussing, domestic violence, breaking things, anger management issues, you know, drug infested area, poverty, like whatever it is, a number of those things that we know are adverse childhood experiences, traumatic experiences. It is one's normal way of life. So they don't know that it's trauma until, like you said, until someone educates them and really opens their eyes, or what I like to say clinically, elevates their perspective so that they have a much clearer understanding of how these things that they have gone through have, in essence, robbed them of their power to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And that ties into sense of self, which, I know we're going to talk about tonight as well.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's talk about that. Like, okay, let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about sense of self. What does it
Mm-hmm.
mean, and how do we get a sense of self, and how does it help us?
So your sense of self is, and it's a catch 22. So I'm going to tease it out for you a little bit. So your sense of self refers to your perception of the collection of characteristics that define you. So think about it, Larry, as your personality traits, your abilities, your likes and dislikes, your belief system, your moral code, and things that motivate you. All of those things contribute to your self-image and your unique identity as a person. But there's one thing that you have to be mindful of when it comes to really plugging into your sense of self and your authentic sense of self, and that is that word perception. So you have to make sure that your perception of your characteristics that are defining you, you have to make sure that they're accurate. Otherwise, you literally are allowing yourself to be defined by a lie.
So, so how accurate? So, how many? I guess if you can give a percentage,
Sure.
in your either in your professional opinion or your personal opinion or whatever, how if you were to give a percentage, what percentage of people actually have an accurate picture or an accurate sense of self? Like what percentage would you say?
Ooh, like I honestly think that that percentage is low. And I think that it's low for a few reasons. The primary reason is because of what you said in the beginning. People don't even understand what a sense of self is. They don't understand. It's like we'll hear words, and I'm not somebody that uses a bunch of slang, so I don't know what most recent slang is, but you'll hear people say, "Oh, they're fake. Oh, they're phony. Oh, you're being extra." Those sorts of things that indicate that someone is not being authentic. They're being fake, they're being phony, they're putting on a facade. And here's the thing. We live in the age of social media. There's so many people on social media, Larry, that are hiding behind this inauthentic lie of who they really are. And one of the things that I say as a clinician is, why are you hiding who you really are? Why do you have to create this public persona that you got it going on and nothing bothers you and everything is peaches and cream and rah, rah, rah? It's because you're an inauthentic human being. People have learned how to be uncomfortable in their own skin for a variety of reasons. So we live in a fake society. We live in a society where people are terrified of being judged and criticized and ostracized and belittled and degraded and demeaned because of who they are. So they create this public persona that becomes their truth, but in actuality, they're living a lie. And what I say to my clients and how I live my life is I'm going to be authentically who I am unapologetically. Life is not a a competition or a popularity contest, but people think it is. And that's why they're afraid to be authentically who they are. So I would suffice it to say there's a whole lot more inauthentic people walking the face of the earth than there are authentic people walking the face of the earth because people were afraid to be vulnerable and transparent and show people who they really are.
Yeah, you're right. I think I remember I'm just reminded of something. Years ago, I wrote a blog post and I was talking about I
Mm-hmm.
forget what it was about, but I remember
Mm-hmm.
putting in there about how people say that it's you know be yourself because when you try to be someone else it's hard and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying actually I don't believe that. I believe that to be someone else is actually easier. It's hard to be yourself. And I said
And I
that
would
years
agree.
ago.
Yeah, I think both are hard, right? I think both are hard. It's like when I think about people who walk around, in essence, lying about who they are, I think that that's challenging because you have to remember the last lie you told. In
Mhm.
essence, you have to remember the last false self that showed up in the room. Whereas being your authentic self is equally difficult for some people because they, and I say this frequently, people treat negative emotional experiences like they're domestic terrorists. People don't want to feel anything that hurts. And I was like, well, you act as if not acknowledging the fact that something hurts you makes it go away or makes the pain less. It doesn't. It still hurts you. You're just lying to yourself about the fact that it did. So why not take your power back from those negative emotional experiences and you get to decide how are those experiences going to impact you because you really do not have to be a victim of your circumstances. Your past and your present negative or painful experiences don't get to define you unless you decide that they should.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So to bring it to finish that point, so if we can get an accurate sense of self, what
Mm-hmm.
what will that do for us? What will that do for someone who can get that?
So being true to yourself first and foremost allows you to live life uninhibited, right? It allows you to be free of having to wear the Halloween mask all the time. It allows you to be able to develop a level of comfort in expressing your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions honestly. It equips you to be able to make decisions that you truthfully feel are in your best interest, whether other people co-sign your decisions or not. In other words, you're not navigating life dancing to the beat of somebody or something else's drum. It takes courage to be authentically who you are, but I tell folks all the time, it is absolutely positively so liberating that people are doing themselves a disservice by walking around fearful that people are going to judge them and criticize them. They're going to judge you and criticize you, period. It doesn't make a
Yeah.
difference. Whether you're authentic or inauthentic, people are going to judge you and criticize you. So why not experience that judgment and criticism being authentically who you are?
Man, that's good. That is so good. All that is worth it. All that is worth the courage to be yourself. That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about relationship wellness. This you know,
Ooh.
oh man, I don't even know where to begin with this
Ooh.
because it's relationships are
As Bill
everything.
Bellamy says, in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, relationships are everything. You need relationships, whether it's romantic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
a relationship with your mother and your father, your sisters and brothers. Like you need
Yep.
that. And so,
Yeah.
how do you define relationship wellness, and what does it look like?
Well,
Or
so there's, I'm going
or
to
you
give
can
you,
say, how are people? You can either start off with how are people getting it wrong, and then what is the right way, or however you want to take it.
So, so I'm going to give you the clinical perspective of what relationship wellness is. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? And I'm if you give me extend me a little bit of grace to tease this out a little bit. I want to first say that in order for people to have healthy relationships, Larry, they have to understand that the first important relationship that they must have is their relationship with themselves. If you are not in right relationship with yourself, how can you possibly have healthy, loving, fulfilling, sustainable relationships with other people? You can't. So you need to be able to do a self check and really be honest with yourself in evaluating, do I love myself? Do I like myself? Am I putting my best foot forward each day? Am I coming out the door today with it purposed in my heart, mind, spirit, and soul to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday, right? Am I conducting myself in a way that if somebody that I love and care about brought somebody exactly like me home to meet the family, would I co-sign me? Right? And a lot of times the answer to that question is no. So if that's if that's the case, then that tells you that there's room for some self-work to be done. You can't have healthy, loving, fulfilling, sustainable relationships if you don't like and love yourself properly first. You can't give from an empty bank account. You can't. It's empty. So you have to make sure that your self-love is on point. You have to make sure that you are being deliberate and intentional in your efforts to be securely attached, because those two things are going to be key ingredients to you having healthy relationships with other people. There is no such thing as a perfect relationship. We're always going to have imperfect relationships because we're imperfect beings, but we can have healthy relationships. And that's what too many people neglect. That people spend a lot of time, Larry, entering into relationships that are based on what they want or what they think they want, and they totally dismiss or neglect their needs. Some people don't even know what they need in a relationship because they've been in one fractured relationship after the other, after the other, after the other, and people aren't giving themselves time to heal. They aren't giving themselves time to really know who they are. So if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what sense of self is, if you haven't taken the time to really truly connect with yourself, in actuality, you're entering your relationships as a stranger. And
Yeah.
therein lies a major problem. You have to be willing to know who you are so that the people that you're interacting with know who they're getting. Like when I'm working on my with my clients on sense of self, I tell them I need you to ask yourself three questions. Who am I? Who do people say I am? And who do I pretend to be? Who you are and who people say you are lined up. No matter what Larry I'm getting, it's all the same Larry.
Yeah. And what you said, like as far as like the relationship with ourselves, that
Mm-hmm.
like you're right, and it's not only right clinically and naturally, but it's also right biblically because
Yes.
the when God says uh the greatest two commandments is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your strength, all your might, and then the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. But if you
Yes.
pay attention to that carefully, it's love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that
Right.
is implied that you love yourself, and I
Right.
think people miss
Right.
that part.
Oh,
So
sure they do. Sure they do. Look, Clark, go zooming right on past that. Think about it this way. If all you're doing is sustaining injury because you're jumping from one fractured relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, and nobody is taking the time to heal, How can you have a healthy relationship? I have an activity that I do with my clients. It's called a relationship litmus. And the relationship litmus has them identify their needs, their wants, and their don't wants. And then and I tell them to try and make each of those categories an exhaustive a list as they possibly can. After they do that, I tell them to use a Likert scale between 1 and 10, with 1 being not very important and 10 being highly important, and go through and everything that you put in each of those categories, give it a value. Steer clear of marking everything as a 10. There's no perfect person. Like, good luck finding that, oh, Dr. Ben's all 10. That's unrealistic. You have to have some flexibility because we're dealing with imperfect beings in our relationships. So you identify the importance of each thing that you put in each of those categories. Relationship research does show us that roughly only 80% of our needs are going to be met in relationships anyway. The wants column is your icing on the cake. That's the bells and whistles. Those are the things that you ultimately would like to have in a relationship. But if you don't have them, it's not going to like destroy the relationship. The don't wants category is your red flags. People ignore red flags all day, every day, Larry. And it's like, if you have something that, you're interacting with somebody, you meeting them, you just starting to date them or whatever, and there are some things that are on your don't wants list, and ideally you rate them, the ones that you rate a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. They're not like, deal breakers or anything like that, but they're definitely things you're going to want to pay attention to. The 6, 7, and 8 items are items that, depending on what they are, you're probably going to want to have an intervention of some sort so that you can make sure that those things don't morph into 9s and 10s, because those 9s and 10s are deal breakers. Those are things that indicate that that relationship is highly toxic, it is not healthy, and it could morph into something that is so problematic that it could be life altering. After I have my clients do that, I tell them to assess the relationships that they've had previously to the one that they are currently in or the one that they were most recently in. And what you learn is that oftentimes people's relationships are sitting in the lower ranked items of their wants category, the high ranked items in the don't wants category, and little to no items reflected in the needs category at all. And then you wonder why your relationship is a disaster, because you have these behavioral patterns where you repeatedly find yourself in these relationships that are not substantive, they are not healthy, they're serving to injure you further emotionally and relationally.
If you're thinking about breaking into the tech field, then you should enroll in Course Careers. Our economy has changed, and so has the way we start careers. Course Careers is an online platform that will help you start your career faster without wasting money on college. With the Course Careers program, you can enroll into their online self-paced courses to begin, and you can complete the course in as little as a few weeks. And you don't have to worry about having the time to finish because all the courses are self-paced. You'll learn everything that's required to land your first job in tech sales, digital marketing, or information technology. The people at Course Careers partner directly with companies that want to hire you when you finish the program. People that finish the program are making $60,000 a year working from home. One person was able to finish the course within 2 weeks, and before they can even apply to any companies, their dream company reached out to them and set up an interview. They offered them over $100,000 a year starting in a fully remote position, and they didn't have any previous experience. If you want to get into the tech field, then go to my website, theladavis.com, to enroll today. And just for my listeners of this show, you can get a $50 discount when you use the coupon code LA50. That's LA50. Just go to theladavis.com/career, and you can also find that link in the show description. Course Careers is the quickest and most affordable way to change or start a career. And so let's talk about overcoming adversity and trauma. I'm 41 years old, so I'm old enough to have a foot in one generation and young enough to kind of have one foot in this generation. And I'm right at the edge of a millennial. I'm a millennial, like right at the edge of it. And but so I do understand that for years, even if we did it wrong, we
Mm-hmm.
found ways to overcome. I feel today, even if we did it wrong, even if we, hushed it
Mm-hmm.
up and just powered and white
Mm-hmm.
knuckled it and everything like that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what damage that caused, but we didn't just fall apart, even if it was
Mm-hmm.
the wrong way of going about it. But
Mm-hmm.
today of what I see is, as far as overcoming adversity and trauma, it's not the same, and the older generation
Mm-hmm.
recognizes that this younger generation is like, when they get knocked down, they just stay down and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I
Mm-hmm.
can't go on. So I think this question is important, definitely for the younger generation. How do we overcome adversity and trauma?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. So I want to gently and respectfully challenge
Okay.
the ideology that people white knuckled it and pushed through it. Pushing through it and white knuckling it doesn't mean that you dealt with it, right? Suppression is a real problem, particularly in Black and Brown communities, right? Why? Because I believe that it's the residual effects of slavery. We have been forced to survive. We have had to survive, 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 survive. But are we truly thriving if we have all of this internal trauma that has just been suppressed and packed down? High blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, see, I mean, you name it, addiction, abuse. There's so many debilitating diseases that are exacerbated because of stress, that are exacerbated because of people's mental state of mind. Larry, your thoughts and feelings are the remote control that determines what frequency your brain operates on. So, in other words, your thoughts and feelings are determining what you're emitting out into the atmosphere. Hence why you can walk into a room and you might say, "Whoa, what's going on? The tension's so thick I can cut it with a knife." You feel it, right? You can walk into a room and nobody has to say a word. And that energy is so tight in there that you know that something is wrong or something is off. So, yes, I'm sure that there are plenty of people from previous generations that did whatever it is they felt like they needed to do to address it. But one of the things that we talk about clinically is a multi-generational transmission process. And the multi-generational transmission process is just that. It's a transmission, if you will, of the behaviors and the thought processes that are connected to these traumatic experiences, and then you wonder why what you said is true. Why does this generation lay down and not get up? Why is the suicide rate through the roof? Why is there an a significant increase in mental illness in this generation than in previous generations? One, because there's more people to diagnose it and put a label on it. Two, because it's getting harder and harder and harder, Larry, to hide it. It's not you sweeping it under the rug. You just, you know what, like you said, oh, he went to the crazy house. Okay. Well, you do know that people are predisposed to mental illness. If there's a genetic component, there's a health, there's so many different moving parts that come with mental illness that white knuckling it and pushing through it doesn't mean that it got dealt with. Think about, just reflect upon family and friends and community. And rhetorical question, but I want you to get the number in your head. How many drug addicts and alcoholics do you know? How many pedophiles do you know? How many people do you know that have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault? How many people do you know that can't stay gainfully employed? How many people do you know that battle with what appears to be depression or anxiety? You know what we said back then? Well, she just got bad nerves. She just got bad nerves. We talk about, well, she just had a nervous breakdown. She's a little off. Those are the types of narratives that we heard about previous generations, but it was mental illness. And it was mental illness that was not being addressed because back in the day, so I've got you by 14 years, but similarly comparable generation, right? Back in the day, you know what people talked about? Schizophrenia. That's all people talked about. People talked about schizophrenia. There was no discussion about bipolar disorder with manic features back then. There was no discussion about unipolar. There was no discussion about eating disorders back then. Nothing. It was schizophrenia. It was schizophrenia, or they had a nervous breakdown. But she's just a little sad. So that lack of knowledge was causing people to perish. And then we fast forward, and now we have all of this added stimuli in our environment and in our society globally today that is rapidly deteriorating the mental health of this generation. How can they get up? Who's taught them how?
Yeah.
Nobody taught them how. How could they possibly get up? When I reflect upon the issues of mental illness in my own family and the number of suicides that have occurred amongst family and friends, it's heartbreaking. But you know what it looked like back in the day? Alcoholism, drug addiction, can't hold down a job. You remember back in the day, people talked about Ned DeWine.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about Ned DeWine, right? You know, it was labeled other things, but it was mental illness and it didn't get dealt with. It was suppressed. It was swept under the rug. And as a result, we've had this deplorable and depreciating multi-generational transmission of all of this illness that's manifesting itself in so many different ways in our homes and in our communities and in society at large. When was the last time you heard of a mass shooting on TV, and when they talked about the perpetrator, there wasn't something that said, oh, they had a history of mental illness?
Yeah.
But in,
Every
literally
time. Every
almost
time.
everyone, when they go peeling into peeling back the layers of the person that committed the crime, 99.9% of the time, there's been a follow-up narrative that says there was a history of mental illness and nobody did anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, this has been so good. This has been so good. This has been definitely something that we definitely need to talk about. Like you said, white knuckling it and stuffing it down is not the answer.
Yeah.
But I believe the answer is what we're doing now, talking about it, getting educated, and things like that. So as we draw to a close,
Can
go
I
ahead.
say one more thing?
Yeah.
Because and I apologize. I don't feel like I answered your question with enough clarity.
Okay.
So the short version of what do we do? How do we overcome trauma? We have to acknowledge that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
We have to acknowledge that something happened to us, or something that we bear witness to has had a negative impact on how we're thinking, feeling, functioning, and navigating this thing called life. And we have to recognize that there are people that are equipped to help you to navigate these experiences. Larry, it is not enough to just read a self-help book. It is not enough to just listen to a podcast. It is not enough to self-diagnose. There, mental health and mental illness is complex and it is layered. So for people to try to treat themselves, that's a slippery slope. And you have to be very, very careful because there's so much that goes into us giving a formal mental health diagnosis. And you don't want to mess around and treat yourself wrong and end up bringing more harm to yourself than good. You need to be able to work with a professional to have the appropriate conversations that are necessary to get at the root, because it's at the root that we can pull it out at the root so that you can begin to truly heal and move forward. But the conversations definitely the conversations and addressing the stigma is a starting point. But then the next step has to be, we have to have a call to action so that people can go out there and get the appropriate help that they need.
Yeah, you hear that, people? Stay off the internet. Don't don't Google what's wrong with you. Don't Google,
Stop it,
you
I
know.
say. Stop
So
it.
yeah. So as we bring it to a close, like, are there any, like, where do we start? Is there any resources? What is the simplest way that we can just start to get educated on what we need to do and how do we need to find support?
Absolutely. So there's a few different ways. So you can, Google's everybody's friend, right?
Yep.
So you literally can go online and you can Google, if it's trauma that needs to be addressed, trauma informed therapist or counselor near me. For those individuals that are insured, you can go to your insurance company's directory online, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Aetna. I mean, all of them, and you can go online and find out, does your insurance plan cover mental health services? You can go to links like Psychology Today. all of the um, all of the insurance companies have an actual network provider list, right? So if in fact, and for even those that might not cover mental health, Larry, they still should have mental health providers in their network directory. So you can go through your online portal for your insurance company. For those that aren't insured, do a Google search using the word counselor or therapist. And then if you are particular in the type of therapist that you want to work with, you can put those filters in when you go to those platforms. You can sort of narrow down your options so that you're able to find a therapist. And here's the other important thing. I tell folks, you want to test drive therapists. You absolutely positively, you don't want to, oh, there she is. Just because I'm a Black female therapist that specializes in trauma informed care doesn't mean that I'm the right therapist for you. You need to have questions ready. You need to ask those therapists that you're considering working with, have they ever worked with somebody that has the problem that you're dealing with? Um, do they have diversity and inclusion and cultural sensitivity training? There are very specific questions that you want to ask. As a couple marriage and family therapist, a lot of my clients say, well, are you married? Yep. Right. So and it's a fair question, right? Not suggesting for a moment that some of my colleagues that are practicing couple marriage and family therapy that aren't married, that they can't assist, because they can, but it's all going to depend on what the presenting problems are too, right?
Yeah.
So you are they specializing in addiction treatment? You want to get some specific questions written down or typed up that you can ask therapists that you're considering working with. You want to interview. You want to interview them, but there's a wealth of information out there. But start. Take the first step. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay. Um, it's okay to be apprehensive. It is okay. And know that just because, maybe the first or second person that you give a shot, just because they don't work for you, don't give up. Don't give up. And look at it, it's like, oh, so the first person I dated didn't work, so I'm never going to date again. You wouldn't do that in your romantic life, so why do that to yourself where your mental health is concerned?
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
You deserve to get the help that you need, and give us an opportunity to provide you the support that you need so that you can be the best version of yourself that you can be.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, wow, that so informative. There's a lot been said here today, but again, this is just the start. So if you like what you heard today, please, please, please share this with someone. This has been so good. Dr. Lauren, is how can people connect with you if they want to find out more about whatever you're doing?
Okay. So they can go to my website. My website is drlaurenpitts.com. I'm on all the social media platforms. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I am on TikTok. Did I say them all? Yeah, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't fool with Twitter. So there, my podcast is on Apple, YouTube, Zoom, Facebook, Spotify, pretty much everywhere where podcasts are, they can find me. If they go to the website, they can contact me through the website. I tell folks, if you don't remember what I just said, Google my name. Just Google Dr. Lauren D. Pitts. Um, and I come up. So I literally I'm everywhere. I am everywhere. So I'm not hard to find. And I'm available and folks can reach out.
Okay, and I'll make sure I put some of that in the show notes, in the show description, your website and all that, so people can connect with you. Dr. Lauren,
Yeah.
thank you again. This has been so good. I've learned a lot. I'm pretty sure everybody else has learned a lot. Thank you so much for stopping by and sharing some wisdom and knowledge with us today.
Indeed. Thank you so much for having me. It has truly been a pleasure. And anytime, anytime. Tell folks to shoot me some questions, shoot me an email. Glad to be of
Absolutely.
service.
Absolutely.
Thank
I
you.
hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Lauren Pitts. That's all I got for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Listen, if you like the show, please rate it and leave a review. iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, like it and share it with someone. Please, please, please share this with someone, because this is important conversation. We all need it. So share it with someone. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get the updated episodes when they get released. Thank you for watching and listening. And remember, let's win in life. And to do that, you got to keep a growth state of mind.